So issues around time and date are always a bit complicated, but they're also pretty essential to dealing with social data. We're going to run into time and date issues later on when we talk about pandas and when we talk about databases and a bunch of other places. But I wanted to at least briefly touch on some of the modules and functions that let you deal with times and dates in Python directly, because frankly, you always seem to run into this, and it's not entirely sensible. Most computers at this point use what's called Unix time, or a Unix timestamp, or a sometimes called the epoch. That is the number of seconds that have passed since the beginning of time, as far as people who use Unix are concerned, which is on January 1st of 1970, which is very groovy, but not very useful. So you usually have to convert that time that's being kept by the operating system into something that's more usable by human beings. And so there's a couple of modules that do this. The big ones are going to be the date. Well, the biggest one is going to be the date time module. And there's actually a date module, and there's a time module, and there's date time, and there's some others. There's an object called time delta, which is kind of, it'll come out of date time, and there's something called object called tzinfo, or time zone, which can help you to convert to the local time zone. But let's just start with thinking a little bit about date time, and we'll go ahead and come up with a sum date. Spelling is key. Sum date. We'll just call it sum. And we have it there, so I must have used it at some point. Sum date equals, we'll do this in ISO format, 1971 07 21, just some random date. And so this is a string, obviously. It's called sum date, but in fact, I can go ahead and run this, and then I can do a quick type. Oops, I have a space in there, which I shouldn't. It'll still work, but I shouldn't do. Someday. Nope, it's some date is what we're calling this. And it'll tell us that the type there is string. So that's a string, which we knew by looking at, but because we called it a date, it's a little bit confusing. It's actually, I should have called it string date or something. Now, if we wanted to find out what the year is, how could we do that? This is one of those, pause and see if you can figure out on your own. How do you get at this? And the answer is we know how to slice strings, right? So we could get at the string version of it by saying some date, and then we do our open brackets, and we want to do the first. Sorry, let me move off that. Well, you can see anyway. We want to do those first 4, right? So to do that, we do nothing before it. We just start with this, and then we say 4. We want the first 4. And if we run that, we get 1971. It has the quotation marks around it, which means it's a string. We probably want to use it as a number, right? So we can convert it back into a number by doing int to change it into an integer, and then doing the same thing there and finding out what it does then. And it spits it out as a number, 1971. Honestly, you could do a lot of this, of going back and forth and figuring out the day and the dates and the rest of it. But we have this date time module here that kind of helps us make sense of these things. So let's convert this string into a date time a date time object. And we'll do this. I'm saving myself the typing and torturing you with that. My birthday. Yes, it is my birthday. Please use it only to get me presents and not to steal my identity. My birthday, here is a string. This is the ISO format of the string, year, month, day, right? how do I convert that in? And the way I do that is by using a a method of date time called string parse time, stir p time, string parse time. And this seems like remember when we said before, it's great in Python if you can read it as if it's English, and stir time doesn't come off as English. But if you know any other languages, C and Java and others often make use of this same kind of library to kind of get at the string p time. So it's a method for date time, and it takes two arguments. The first is this is why we shouldn't copy paste some date. The first is the string that you're trying to convert or you're trying to parse. And then there's the pattern that you're parsing with. And this definitely looks like not something that's like English at all. And if you look, this is the documentation for Python. It gives you what each of these codes are. So if you look here, we have a capital Y, a lower with a dash. The dash is the dash. A capital Y, a lowercase m, and a lowercase d. So it says this is the pattern we're trying to match. And the capital Y, this is the without the century, is lowercase y. Capital Y is with the century. And then we have lowercase m, which is somewhere here. Lowercase m is the m month as a 0 padded decimal, so like 07. And then we have the day as the decimal day. So this kind of takes whatever the string is and tries to force it through this to create a date time. And if we run that, it doesn't do anything, right? Because it's created this new variable, my birthday, which is not a string. It's an object. We can do again. We can find out what type it is by saying type my birthday, and it will tell us that it is a date time type. In other words, it's this kind of object. And so there's things you can do with my birthday. For example, you can go back the other direction, and you can format it in a different way, or you can well, let's do that first. So the opposite of string parse time is string format time, stirp time and stirf time. But we can do my birthday. Well, actually, we're going to do it as a function, method of date time. So date time, stirf time, my birthday. It's the first variable, and now we're going to give it the string that we want to use to do it. And let's do like let's make it look pretty. Ooh, let's do the day of the week, full day of the week. So and then we'll do the full month name, which is right here, capital B. And then there's not much fancy you can do with the day, so we'll do just what we had above, which is D, and then the full year. It's the same thing, so we'll just do year. So what this says is it says take this object, which is, we can't really get at it without formatting it or doing something with it. So get this object and convert it into a string using this pattern, right? So let's go ahead and see what that does. Wednesday, July 21st, 1971. So now I know I was born on a Wednesday. All right. Let's see. So we've taken that and done that. What if we wanted to know the difference between two dates? So we've got one date time, which is my birthday. We could also do, we could do this real quick. Now you're going to know when I recorded this. So this creates a date time object of now, which is 2020 and the time and the date. This is not my time locally. This is the time Zulu. This is a global time, GMT. So we can take date time now, and then we can take from that my birthday. We'll store this in a variable called how old. Okay, so we have this in as a delta, right? Let's see what happens if we just say, this isn't something normally I would do, but we'll find out. Oops. We'll just try how old. I think it'll give us the yeah. So there's the delta. Now this actually does tell you the pieces of that thing, but if we were going to use it, we'd probably want to do, for example, this, which is how old am I in days? I am now 18,032 days, which I'm good with that. I don't feel a day older than 18,000 flat. So that kind of gets us at that. Now, we could go into a little bit the issue of localization for time zones. You can kind of create a time zone and find it and localize it. But for now, I'm just going to leave it here with being able to convert into a datetime object, convert back to from a string to the datetime object, from the datetime object to the string, and then also how to establish these kind of deltas. There's some more to that. If, for example, you wanted to kind of make sure you were adding 2 weeks to something or something like that, it's possible. But as I said, because you're more likely to be using this within other modules, I don't want to dive too deeply into it for now. But you have at least the basics here. And again, the documentation is sometimes extensive to a fault, but it's all in here so that this is all open and available to you. So if you do need to dive into this, there are all the resources you have for any of these issues. There's the Python documentation itself. There's a ton of tutorials. And frankly, if you just Google, how do I do this in Python? There's a good chance someone out there has run into the problem and has a little snippet of code that will let you know how to do that with dates in Python. All right, see you next time.